Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I share real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your worth. Today's story is absolutely incredible. It's about how a simple family dinner criticism turned into the most satisfying career breakthrough you've ever heard. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow. So picture this: you've been cooking your heart out for years, perfecting recipes, experimenting with flavors, and everyone who tastes your food raves about it. But then your in-laws, the people who are supposed to support you, tell you that your cooking isn't good enough for their precious holiday dinner. Well, what happened next will blow your mind. Let's dive in. Our story begins with Sarah, a 32-year-old woman who had always been passionate about cooking. Ever since she was a little girl, she'd spend hours in the kitchen with her grandmother, learning family recipes and creating her own unique dishes. Cooking wasn't just a hobby for Sarah, it was her love language, her way of showing care and bringing people together. When Sarah married David 3 years ago, she was excited to become part of his family. David's parents, Margaret and Robert, seemed nice enough at first. They lived in an upscale neighborhood, drove luxury cars, and always made sure everyone knew about their successful careers. Margaret was a marketing director at a prestigious firm, and Robert was a senior partner at a law office. From the beginning, Sarah noticed that Margaret had very specific ideas about how things should be done. The right restaurants to visit, the proper way to set a table, the appropriate gifts to bring to social gatherings. But Sarah tried to fit in, always bringing homemade dishes to family gatherings, and here's the thing: everyone loved Sarah's cooking. David's cousins would ask for seconds and thirds. His brother would literally lick his plate clean. Even the neighbors at block parties would seek out Sarah's contributions first. Her signature dishes included a mouth-watering herb-crusted salmon with lemon butter sauce, a creamy mushroom risotto that took hours to perfect, and a chocolate lava cake that people literally dreamed about. But Margaret would always find something to criticize. "Oh, this is a bit too salty for my taste," or "I prefer a more traditional approach to this dish," or "well, it's interesting." The passive-aggressive comments were constant, but Sarah tried to brush them off, thinking Margaret was just particular about food. Then came last November, just before Thanksgiving. The family was planning their annual holiday dinner, a big affair with extended family, close friends, and some of Robert's important business contacts. It was always held at Margaret and Robert's house, and it was treated like the social event of the season. Sarah had been looking forward to contributing to this dinner for months. She'd been planning a special menu: her famous butternut squash soup with sage and brown butter, a perfectly seasoned prime rib with her secret herb rub, roasted vegetables with a balsamic glaze that had taken her years to perfect, and her grandmother's apple pie recipe that had been passed down for 4 generations. 2 weeks before the dinner, Sarah approached Margaret with her menu ideas. She was so excited, she'd even written everything down on beautiful recipe cards, complete with shopping lists and preparation timelines. Margaret looked at the cards for exactly 30 seconds before sliding them back across the kitchen counter. "Oh, Sarah, honey," Margaret said with that condescending smile Sarah had come to dread, "I appreciate the effort, I really do. But this dinner is quite important to us. We have some very distinguished guests coming, Robert's senior partners, some potential clients, people from the country club. We need to make sure everything is, well, perfect." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "Well, your cooking is fine for casual family dinners, but this is different. This is sophisticated. We've already arranged for the meal to be catered by Chateau Blanc, you know, that French restaurant downtown. They do all the high-end events in the city." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Fine for casual family dinners? After 3 years of bringing dishes that everyone devoured, after countless compliments from family members, after David constantly bragging about his wife's incredible cooking skills? But Margaret, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Everyone always loves what I make. Just last month at David's birthday party, your sister asked me for my lasagna recipe. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. Oh, that's different. This is a formal dinner party. We need consistency, presentation, professional quality. I'm sure you understand. Sarah looked at David, hoping he would speak up for her. But David just stood there, looking uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. That hurt almost as much as Margaret's words. So what you're saying, Sarah said slowly, is that my cooking isn't good enough for your important guests. I'm saying we need professional catering for a professional event. Margaret replied, but her meaning was crystal clear. That night, Sarah cried herself to sleep while David tried to console her with weak excuses about his mother being particular and under a lot of stress. But the damage was done. Sarah felt humiliated, rejected, and completely undervalued. Now, here's where our story takes an interesting turn. Sarah could have just accepted the rejection and moved on. She could have showed up to the dinner as a guest, eaten the fancy catered food, and pretended everything was fine. But Sarah had something that Margaret didn't realize. She had real talent, real passion, and real determination. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She was going to prove, once and for all, that her cooking was not just fine for casual dinners. She was going to show everyone exactly what they were missing. Sarah had been working part-time as a freelance graphic designer, but she'd always dreamed of turning her cooking into something more. She'd taken culinary classes at the local community college, she'd worked briefly at a high-end restaurant during college, and she'd even considered going to culinary school before life took her in a different direction. So Sarah started researching. She looked into catering licenses, commercial kitchen rentals, and food service regulations. She reached out to her old culinary instructor, Chef Martinez, who had always encouraged her to pursue cooking professionally. Sarah, Chef Martinez exclaimed when she called. I've been wondering when you'd finally take the leap. Your skills were always restaurant quality. What took you so long? Within 2 weeks, Sarah had her catering license, had rented time in a commercial kitchen, and had created a portfolio of her best dishes with professional photography. She called her new business Sage and Time Catering, a nod to her grandmother's herb garden and her own love of fresh, seasonal ingredients, but Sarah didn't tell anyone in David's family about her new venture. She wanted to establish herself first, to build a reputation based on merit, not family connections. Her first few gigs were small: a baby shower for a friend, a retirement party for a former colleague, a birthday dinner for 8 people. But word spread quickly. Sarah's food wasn't just delicious, it was memorable. She had a gift for combining familiar flavors in unexpected ways, for a presentation that was both elegant and approachable, and for creating dishes that made people feel genuinely happy. By January, she was booking events every weekend. By February, she had a waiting list. And by March, something incredible happened. Before we continue with what happened next, I just want to remind you that if you're enjoying this story, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means everything. And it helps me bring you more amazing stories like this one. In March, Sarah got a call that would change everything. It was from Jennifer Walsh, an event coordinator at one of the city's most prestigious venues. Sarah, I've been hearing incredible things about your catering, Jennifer said. I have a client who's looking for someone special for a very important corporate event. It's for Hartwell and Associates. They're one of the biggest consulting firms in the state. Their CEO, Michael Hartwell, is hosting a dinner for their top clients and partners. We're talking about 150 people, very high-end, very visible. Are you interested? Sarah's heart started racing. Hartwell and Associates, she knew that name. That was Robert's law firm. Robert was a senior partner there, and Michael Hartwell was his boss. "Tell me more," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice professional. "The event is in 2 weeks. They want a sophisticated menu, something that will really impress. The budget is substantial, they're not cutting corners. But here's the thing, their original caterer just canceled due to a family emergency, so they're in a bind. I recommended you because everyone who's tried your food can't stop talking about it." Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. This was her chance to prove herself on the biggest stage possible, in front of the very people who had dismissed her cooking as not good enough. "I'll do it," she said. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah crafted a menu that was both sophisticated and approachable: pan-seared duck breast with cherry gastrique, wild mushroom Wellington with truffle oil, herb-crusted rack of lamb with rosemary juice, and for dessert, individual chocolate soufflés with raspberry coulis and gold leaf garnish. She tested every dish multiple times, adjusting seasonings and presentation until everything was perfect. She hired 2 assistants from her culinary school network, rented additional equipment, and even invested in new serving pieces to ensure everything looked flawless. The night before the event, Sarah barely slept. She kept running through every detail in her mind, checking and rechecking her prep lists. David knew she was catering a big corporate event, but she hadn't told him which company. She wanted this to be her moment, her success, without any family drama or interference. The day of the event arrived. Sarah and her team arrived at the venue 4 hours early to begin setup. The location was stunning, a historic mansion converted into an event space, with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As Sarah arranged the appetizer stations and put the finishing touches on the presentation, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was her chance to show the world what she could do. This was her moment to prove that her cooking wasn't just fine for casual dinners, it was extraordinary. The guests began arriving at 6 o'clock, and Sarah watched from the kitchen as elegantly dressed men and women filled the reception area. She recognized several faces from David's family gatherings, Robert's colleagues, people from their social circle, the very crowd that Margaret was always trying to impress, and then she saw them. Robert and Margaret walked in, looking perfectly polished as always. Margaret was wearing a designer dress and her most expensive jewelry, clearly dressed to impress. They had no idea that the professional caterer they'd be eating from tonight was the same daughter-in-law whose cooking wasn't good enough for their holiday dinner. The cocktail hour began, and Sarah's appetizers were served, bacon-wrapped scallops with lemon aioli, truffle mushroom crostini, and her signature stuffed mushrooms with herb cream cheese and pancetta. Sarah watched through the service window as guests reached for seconds and thirds, as conversations paused while people savored each bite, as smiles spread across faces. "Excuse me," a server came back to the kitchen, "the guests are asking who the caterer is. They want to know where these appetizers came from." Sarah's heart swelled with pride, but she told her team to simply say the catering company name without mentioning her personally. She wanted the food to speak for itself. Dinner service began, and Sarah had never been more focused in her life. Every plate that left the kitchen was perfect. The duck was cooked to exactly medium rare, the Wellington was golden and flaky. The lamb was tender and perfectly seasoned. The presentation was restaurant quality, with artistic plating and garnishes that looked like they belonged in a food magazine. From her position in the kitchen, Sarah could hear the buzz of conversation from the dining room growing more animated. People were clearly impressed. She saw servers returning with empty plates and heard comments like, "This is incredible," and "Where did you find this caterer?" But the real moment came during the main course. Michael Hartwell himself, the CEO of the company, Robert's boss, stood up to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the dining room, "I have to interrupt dinner to say something. In 30 years of hosting corporate events, I have never, and I mean never, had food this exceptional. This is not just catering, this is culinary artistry. I don't know who this chef is, but I need to meet them immediately." Sarah's hands were shaking as she heard the applause from the dining room. This was beyond her wildest dreams. The CEO of one of the city's most prestigious firms was praising her cooking in front of 150 influential people, including her own in-laws who had dismissed her abilities. A few minutes later, Jennifer Walsh burst into the kitchen with the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. "Sarah, you need to come out there. Mr. Hartwell is demanding to meet the chef. He's talking about hiring you for every company event from now on." "This is incredible." Sarah took off her apron, smoothed her hair, and walked into the dining room. The moment she appeared, a hush fell over the crowd. And then she saw Robert and Margaret's faces. The shock was immediate and unmistakable. Margaret's mouth literally fell open. Robert's eyes went wide with recognition. They clearly had no idea that the professional caterer who had just received a standing ovation from their CEO was their own daughter-in-law. Michael Hartwell approached Sarah with genuine enthusiasm, completely unaware of the family drama unfolding. "In the background, you must be the chef," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Hartwell, and I have to tell you, this is the best meal I've had outside of a Michelin-starred restaurant. Your duck was perfection, and don't even get me started on that Wellington. Where did you train?" Sarah shook his hand, feeling more confident than she had in months. "Thank you so much, Mr. Hartwell. I'm Sarah Thompson, owner of Sage and Time Catering. I trained at the Culinary Institute and worked in fine dining before starting my own business. Well, I need your card. Your schedule, everything. We host events like this monthly, and I want you for all of them. In fact, I'm having a dinner party at my home next month for some international clients. Would you be available?" As Sarah and Mr. Hartwell continued talking, she could see Robert and Margaret whispering frantically to each other across the room. Other guests were approaching, asking for her business information, complimenting specific dishes, and requesting her services for their own events. Then Margaret appeared at Sarah's elbow, her face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like panic. "Sarah," she said in a strained whisper, "what are you doing here?" "I'm working," Sarah replied calmly, turning back to Mr. Hartwell, who was still raving about the meal. "But you're the caterer?" Margaret's voice was barely audible. "Yes, I am. Sage and Time Catering. We specialize in sophisticated cuisine for distinguished guests." The irony was not lost on anyone within earshot. Several people looked confused by the obvious tension, but Sarah maintained her professional composure. Mr. Hartwell, oblivious to the family drama, continued his praise. "Sarah, I have to ask, would you be willing to share some of your recipes? Particularly that cherry gastrique sauce. I've never tasted anything like it." "I'd be happy to discuss that with you," Sarah replied. "Perhaps we could set up a meeting to talk about future collaborations." Margaret looked like she might faint. Here was her boss, the CEO of her husband's firm, literally begging for recipes from the woman she had dismissed as not good enough for their holiday dinner. Robert finally approached, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Sarah, we had no idea. I mean, we didn't know you were a professional caterer." Sarah finished. "Yes, I started my business after the holidays. It's been quite successful, as you can see." The evening continued with Sarah receiving compliment after compliment, business card after business card, and booking after booking. By the end of the night, she had enough new clients to keep her busy for the next 6 months. The ride home that night was interesting. David had arrived separately to pick up his parents, and the three of them sat in stunned silence as Sarah drove her own car, following behind them. When they all arrived at Robert and Margaret's house, the confrontation that had been brewing all evening finally erupted. "Why didn't you tell us?" Margaret demanded the moment they were inside. "Tell you what?" Sarah asked calmly. "That you were starting a catering business. That you were this good." Sarah looked at her mother-in-law for a long moment before responding. You told me my cooking wasn't good enough for your important guests. You said you needed professional quality. Well, tonight you got professional quality, and it happened to be mine, but Sarah, Robert interjected, if you had known what? That I was capable of more than casual family dinners? That maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing in the kitchen? Margaret sat down heavily in her chair, the weight of her mistake finally hitting her. Your boss wants to hire me for every company event, Sarah continued. He called my food culinary artistry. He begged for my recipes. The same recipes you dismissed without even tasting them. David finally found his voice. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have supported you. Yes, you should have, Sarah agreed. But you know what? I'm glad you didn't. Because if you had, I might never have started this business. I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of. The room fell silent. Margaret looked genuinely remorseful for the first time Sarah could remember. I owe you an apology, Margaret said quietly. I was wrong. I was threatened by your talent, and I handled it terribly. Your food tonight was extraordinary. Better than anything Chateau Blanc has ever served. It wasn't a complete transformation. Years of passive-aggressive behavior don't disappear overnight. But it was a start. So what happened next? Well, Sarah's catering business exploded. Word spread throughout the city's social and business circles about this incredible new caterer who could create restaurant-quality meals for any occasion. Within 6 months, she had hired a full staff and moved into her own commercial kitchen space. Mr. Hartwell became one of her best clients and biggest advocates, recommending her to everyone he knew. The international dinner party at his home was such a success that it led to contracts with 3 major corporations and 2 country clubs, and yes, Sarah did eventually cater a family holiday dinner, but this time, it was on her terms, with her menu, and with the full appreciation and respect she deserved. The moral of this story? Sometimes the people who doubt you the most end up being the greatest motivation for your success. Sarah didn't just prove her in-laws wrong, she discovered her own potential and built the career of her dreams. Margaret learned a valuable lesson about judging people and dismissing their talents. And David? Well, let's just say he never again failed to stand up for his wife's incredible abilities. If this story inspired you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales of people who turned their setbacks into comebacks. What's a time when someone doubted your abilities, and how did you prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. I love reading them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.